Coach Conversation, episode 13, maybe 12 and a half. We need to look at 12 to see if I'm going to get myself in trouble. But it might be 12, it might be 13, who knows? But either way, welcome. Yeah, we're still in that world of lockdown, but the end is getting nearer, and my massive hair is is now getting more ridiculous by the minute. But the hairdressers are open in some parts. If you know some people,
yeah, I've been tempted, but I'll wait a little bit longer.
Yeah, I've been told I can't visit mine.
Yeah,
the black market is open, sadly. How's your week been?
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh, press superstar.
Oh no, she did a good job. Jess did. Yeah, you know what? Like, we had some really good stuff around International Women's Day this week. We had from the company point of view, I was personally delighted that the female coach program had a whole page, and on the back of that we had 5 different organizations contact thinking about their female coaches, wanting to connect, and even a conversation I think is a really rich start. I was thinking last week, I know we had a brief chat about this, and the concern around International Women's Day just being a day, like just being an isolated day. And I know a lot of people were sharing great actions, and there's loads of allies, and I don't particularly think it's just one day celebration and male or female in this instance, but it's nice to see that there's been some ripple effects and some people kind of taking actions and thinking a little bit longer. And one particular conversation I had this week was with a coach who said he felt a little bit of pressure on that day to post something. And I said, well, did you? And he said, well, I wanted to take an angle that it's normal in our environment, it's normal in our sport, and all the women either being on the committee or using the equipment, the equal amount of equipment and top quality stuff and time in the sport that they have. So he wrote the committee and the bigger organization and to all of the members of the team, the entire span of them, a letter to just kind of say, like, this is what I've noticed over the years. This is the progress we've made. This is where women appear and their voice is represented. I thought it was a lovely touch. It was a really great job. And we had some other coaches in the conversation during the week talk about, again, this kind of extension period of not just having it on one day, normalizing it. But the tricky thing that they feel and they found is when other people make a comment. And so sometimes it's women being the blockers, not leaving the ladder down to pull people up. And then other times it's maybe the tradition of how people use the language around women in sport or women in coaching. And it's until someone says, actually, that sounds a bit off. That doesn't sound right. Or have you thought about the way that you think that would land? So some really interesting conversations on the back of a couple of great posts. And yeah, it was good to get a little bit of space. I didn't think it was going to be just me and just my name in it. So it was a few people scrolling through their BBC Sport going, oh. But yeah, good start to the week.
No, I think, look, credit where it's due. You're doing a great job in many of the different places that you're doing your stuff at the moment. So richly deserved, I think, and it's I'm the lucky one being part of this, doing this for you. I feel at times,
Thank you.
It's great. So well done.
Thank you. And how was your week? What's it look?
Quite quiet week. It was all right. Well, look, the nice thing now is, so my son is back to school, which means I can start to get the wheels moving a bit quicker and gain some momentum from a daily life work perspective. But then the flip side is, so my wife has now gone away for a week. She is in your homeland currently. With hockey. So I'm at home for a week on my own. And I'm used to her being away because of the nature of her job, but she hasn't been away for exactly a year. Literally a year to the day she got back from her last trip. So it's a bit weird being on my own. But so yesterday, for my part-time hobby, I did find a grow it yourself bonsai tree, Like, how cool is that?
You were really preparing for lockdown, weren't you? Bonsai tree, check.
But I then found, I found lots of piles and piles of coaching resources and books and things, which is really useful because I'm starting to write the coaching philosophy for the football club I'm involved in. So I'm going to draw from those kind of different things. I've got professional clubs. I've got all sorts of different kind of. There was one which I don't know where it is, and I probably need to hide the name at the top, so I probably shouldn't have a copy of it. Yeah, so this is a League One club's philosophy, mission, and values, written by the owner from when I was doing some work with them, which is really interesting because it was kind of a different level to other things. But yeah, so I'm going to be diving into that, I think, and I want to make our coaching philosophy. I want to chairman. My chairman doesn't know this yet, but I want to make it into a book. Not one that, like you said, in the shops, but this is going to be a book. So when a new coach joins, or we recruit a new coach, so we talked about the mix of the club of parent coaches and non-parent coaches. So when we get to a certain age, we're going to have non-parent coaches leading.
Wow.
Which was an interesting discussion, but alongside parents, so not just on their own. But I want the philosophy document to have how we approach match day, how we approach training, what we believe player development to look like, what we want our club to look and feel like, our culture, our identity, our values. And here's some practices and things that represent the kind of games we want to use when developing the kids.
Amazing.
So it's going to be a bit bigger, and I've probably given myself a lot harder task than I need to, because when I've scouted around, I've done some research about other kind of people's approaches to philosophies and mission, values, etc. You know, it's a few pages, or it's a few pages on the website, but I kind of want to go a bit deeper and really get into it beyond that. So
yeah, really.
So that's my time now, is just writing that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like the only experience I had one of them would be around an athlete handbook, if we use the old term of it. I'm sure there's a funkier name now to put it together, but like if somebody was deciding to do, I know you've skimmed over it there, do a cool book for a club or an athlete handbook, what do you think are the key things that need to be in it? I know you've skimmed over some, but like in a bullet point kind of way so people can grab some notes, because I think it's a brilliant idea.
Well, the starting point, I think, has to be who you are. You know, so the club that I'm working at has its history that has shaped it to be the club that it is today. You know, they operate in a semi-small market town in Sussex, which is a very different kind of background and heritage to a club than if you were, you know, in a city in a very different kind of area and different community. You know, this part of the country that I live has different challenges compared to others. You know, where I used to live, when we had loads of snow and I got snowed in, I used to have to walk 2 miles to get cat food. Otherwise, the cat was going hungry because he couldn't live on chicken nuggets like me. So, you know, we have our own different kind of challenges, right? But definitely at the heart of it is going to be, what's the culture? What's the identity? What are the values that you live on as an organization? So then when we do recruit parents or kids or first team players, they can then see, right, this is what I'm signing up to, and this is what I'm going to be held against in terms of the values. So
I think that's the really interesting part, isn't it? Because we talk week in, week out about different elements of great coaching and experiences you and I have had and other people have had, but there's a vulnerability in stating those kind of things, isn't there? And saying like, listen, if you see things that's outside this, you know, we're not saying that this is the only way, but for us, this is what our aim is and our standards and, you know, those key traditional words, expectations and stuff. And I think it's powerful, really powerful to do something like that and be vulnerable. And if somebody then flags something or sees something, not only having a negative lens on it, but there's a support mechanism there to go, oh, thanks for that. you know, and that ripples down to the quality of coaching and interactions and experience that the athletes have, you know, with the coaches.
But the plan also, I think, right, is I think it makes decision making easier because you've got a framework that you operate within. So if something happens and it is then outside that, you're very clear about what's inside and what's outside. Yeah. And everybody will have their own values about how they operate, how they behave. And that's, you know, that's cool. But we just want to decide what is right and not right for us. And we've got some fairly, some different views around where we're positioned in the football pyramid. You know, we're not a professional club, but we don't want to be a grassroots club that has 5 teams at every age group and 700 kids. We don't want to be like that. We have a different view about how we're going to be. So I can imagine some clubs that do want to be like that in that space will criticize because of what we're trying to do. But that's cool. You know, we just want to do us. Yeah. You know, we talk about one team, one club, one town, one club, because there is literally one big club in our town. But we now need to make it one club because, and again, my experience is that grassroots football clubs and many other grassroots clubs anyway, they're not a club, they're just a collection of teams playing under the same name. You know, the coaches never speak, there's never a clear philosophy, there's never you know. So my mate that runs his son's under 9s team, he has to raise money for his kit and all of that kind of stuff for his own team. You know, so if his team raises £1 million, that doesn't go to the whole club. You know, that stays within his team. Wow. And if one team can't raise any money, they struggle. And this is where I think you're not really a club.
No.
So yeah. So it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting. But while I've got a free house, happy days. So yeah,
Rebecca will come home to pages everywhere and beautiful mind on the wall with the post-its going, I'm almost there.
Yeah. And I'm watching boy films. That's the other thing. So like, yeah. So when she's here, I end up having to watch like rom-coms or Pretty Little Liars or whatever it is that's on the box set that we're working.
You love it.
Yeah, I do.
I'm joking.
But yeah, I get to watch stuff like SWAT and, you know.
Killing an army and movie, thrillers.
Stuff that she doesn't like, not boy films, stuff that she doesn't.
I gotcha. That's a good correction on the back of how we started International Women's Week language. So tail that then with your ideas around an athlete handbook. Would you have one? Wouldn't you have one? Have you had one yourself before? And et cetera.
Yeah, good question. And I'd be really interested in your views on what you've seen, etc. I've made the promise with the coaches and on some information that we've already done that every player at the club, whether you're 7 or you're in the first team and you're being paid X amount a week to play, that you will have an independent development plan, an individual one purely for you. So you all have an IDP with your 7 or your 27, which I will then obviously go back to some of our previous discussions that we've had and, you know, draw from those. So that I think is probably the basis of it. So everybody has a bespoke journey, but wrapped around that has to be the environment that they operate within. So it's a great shout, and I will add it to my list of things I need to do. Because I think we should have something. Yeah. I've never had one as a player. You know, I get given code of conducts, but you know, that's a different topic. I have a different view on that. But an athlete handbook's a great idea. What would you put in it?
So I grew up with them. So I was really fortunate. The school system in Ireland for basketball is absolutely massive. So I filtered into a club pretty quickly, and I had this amazing coach called Jerry Fitzpatrick. And Jerry had studied sports psychology in the States. He was coaching the national team, and he insisted we all had a handbook. And it was an alien concept. I'd come from swimming, nothing like that existed, although I did have very positive experience, this idea of having a manual or having a little handbook. And it was literally, printed pages inside one of those old school folders, with the blue strip and the little things you pop up and down. And it opened with a story about a gazelle, a motivational story, which becomes a kind of quirky conversation point and reference point with all the trips we had. And then in that, from the age of 14, or maybe I was 13 at the time, 13, 14, going into the club, I had how we would like to, some of the similar stuff, how we'd like to be seen, so and represented. So some of the standards, but not about how we executed our training session, just like around kit and how we carried ourselves and how we greeted people. And we fed in as a team, even though we were young, we kind of were maybe prompted with some words and some ideas, and we could kind of tweak it. Then it had opportunities to reflect. So we had a space at the back where you had, at the end of every game, we did our little chit chat, and then we'd go and take our handbooks and we'd quickly write a note down about the players that we'd marked and that had marked us. And I remember there was a girl called Pamela O'Neill. You want a pen? There's one there. We played in this league in Iraq. So he was really good at putting us into different leagues. So we'd have our own local league in Waterford. We'd play national league as a club. And then I played senior. So I had opportunities to be on the bench with that. It was the best team in the country, record-breaking wins and all that at the time. So I was kind of observing and absorbing at the same time, and had some international spaces. But for me, I was able to come back to our local league games and play this girl, Pamela, who was a left-handed player. And there, at the time, in Waterford in the city, they were rarer. And she had this amazing spin move. She had superb passing. And I'd always write down like what I did against her. Not necessarily even before. We'd verbalize kind of how we tried to stop her. And that would be a coach conversation. And we may talk about that at training. But at the end of the session, I'd write down and grade myself and think about it and unpick it. And I'll have to look it up and see. But that back section was really useful for me personally. And then the middle section, we had our plays. But they weren't slotted in. They were put in pre-season. We had these, your typical templates, and we'd write them in. So when I referenced it, it was something I could relate to, and not something that someone else had put in that I had to learn. So it was removing that. Here's the dots. Now we have apps. And again, another team I work with, a Gaelic football team, we just recorded on Coach. It's not Coach Note. Oh, yeah, maybe it is. And we just put it in, and the coach does a voiceover and he sends out. So that's a different sport, obviously, but yeah, really useful. But during the week, I was thinking, as I was having a conversation with a coach in some coach development, and we talked about that. Would you have it for next season, and what would you put in? And does it depend on the age group and the gender and the sport and how how it's received? But I think it's about what's in it and who kind of gathers that information. And it's not just something like, we've made this for you as a coach management committee, you need to take it, So really, really useful. And I've used them, in different roles I've supported coaches in creating them. Sometimes with a senior men's team I worked with a little while ago, they didn't have much use for it. They kind of like said, is this a surveillance thing? Do we have to bring it to every session? But I know that a really small portion of them really enjoyed it. And they would kind of have top-up conversations. But just to finish that on that one is where I think personally there can be a use is if you have an IDP plan in it and you're not fortunate enough to have a support network of maybe, mental skills or sports psychologists or enough access to your coach, then there can be stuff put in that. So a friend of mine set up his company, Impact the Game, and he's offering any coaches that come in this kind of handbooks setup idea. But then what they have is like, well, if confidence is an issue, here's some hints and tips. Now, you can't solve it that easily, but little activities, little ways to approach them. And they're kind of filtered in as he particularly believes that it's all around kind of the mental side of the game. But yeah, just really interesting conversations around handbooks lately. So great that we brought it up.
Yeah, what age would you start them?
I don't know if I could nail a particular age, but I think if you're part of a team or you're part of something that you're going to regularly, so not necessarily down in the the 5-year-olds, but I wouldn't say soon after that. Like even if it was 7 or 8 and they had their little book going into the club, like I used to run a club back in Waterford with the Wildcats team on a Saturday morning, and that had like 120 kids come in the morning. And we were thinking secondary school, we'll just have it for secondary school because they're aware, they'll appreciate it. The younger kids were really jealous. They were like, well, what's in your book? And then we put, for the younger groups, we put an autograph page at the back. So when they came to our senior games on the Saturday night, they then, could use it as that. So it wasn't necessarily like, all the big convoluted words and management of an older team or a more structured team, but it was their book that had the logo of their club, that sense of belonging. So, I don't know if it's like an 8-9-year-old age group and people be like, what, are you mental? But you're not narrowing down them in sport. It's just getting everything together so they don't have to remember everything if there's a lot of information coming at them, Maybe that's a bit silly. I think if they where the people could then say, oh, well, are you taking out time in your session to write down? And what if their writing isn't as good or quick or, whatever. But I think that's where from a coaching point of view, even you sacrifice some of the end of your session for that reflection. And that reflection might come in, even in, okay, out of 5, how did you find this, and this today? And they go into their book and they write down the date and they write down the numbers and I don't know, maybe it's getting a bit too performance mindset-y for me there, but yeah, that's what I think.
It's a really cool idea. I'm definitely going to steal that, I think.
Yeah, I'll root out my old one, but I'll get the gazelle thing and I'll show it to you, even if it's just personally not on here. But we, when we traveled to Europe to play, and this is as a club, traveled all around the country in Ireland to play, the handbook came everywhere. And it was only a plastic thing. It wasn't a bound thing. I don't know how it lasted all that time, but we put so much value on that and being able to then, we built it into journals as we got older and blah, blah, blah. But yeah.
And I can imagine, did it evolve in terms of the language that was in it? So, it changed over time, or how did it there?
Yeah, absolutely. It did. It changed from even the material that we used, because this particular team I was involved in, we were together for a longer period of time. So we put more value and emphasis on having that. So therefore we got like bound books then years after, and you could slot pages in. It was always important that we were able to add to it, that it wasn't a closed, like this is only us for the season. So, people could add extra comments about the plays that we were going to put in, or how they were represented changed. The reflection got a little bit neater with some probing questions instead of just the coach. Maybe when we were younger, the coach would lead with a question and we'd kind of write it down and then add our own angle. But then, you could have your own time to kind of refer for maybe post-training, or even the motivational stuff that was put in there. The stories, they weren't necessarily just motivational, they were thought-provoking. Why am I doing this? Why does this year in, year out, this one gazelle story mean so much to me? So there was one common thread and then other stories that people brought in, but I'm sure, that's just my lens on it, and maybe a couple of my closer friends. There could be a little bit of an echo chamber bias on that, but I think with the majority of the group, we really enjoyed having one. But the language definitely did change over time. I can't say it was ever convoluted though. There was never, it was never lengthy. So the specifics were there from the start, and they were ingrained in the club and the ethos and the language the coach used. We were very fortunate with the expertise and level he was at, that stayed pretty much the same. It was our understanding and the depth we went on it that changed over the years. But the language would have shifted slightly the more knowledge we got around ourselves and the environment and stuff. But
yeah. I think there's one NGB, national governing body here, that have got a book that they use with their coaches that I've never seen. I've heard of this kind of mystical beast that I might try and kind of track down and just look at and see what's in there. And I think some of my experiences from football previously at international level, I think will shape some of what this looks like. But I wonder then also if we need that kind of coaches book type piece, because as you talked about that reflections, we want coaches to be able to reflect on what they've done, whether it's match day training, in some kind of way as well. which again, I don't think we really have a mechanism that's organized and structured to do.
Yeah. I've spoken to a good few coaches about it, and I'm mindful that, each sport and demands of sports are different, that you can't say, well, one shoe fits all. And they all, the majority of coaches that I work with will have the diary and the times, the dates, the reflections, what they notice are in it. But I wonder if there is something out there, which probably there's loads of companies now will say, yeah, of course we have this, this, and this, that are tailored towards coaches, and not just the athlete journal of like your nutrition space, your reflection space, your training. For coaches, is there an opportunity, even if they don't use all the spaces, if there's something to just monitor? Monitor one of the particular things, we've spoken about this in one of our episodes around the noticing element. I think if that's there, if you don't have a WhatsApp group with your coaches and you're not talking after training, and you want to be in private and you need more time to reflect, then having something with those questions, even if you write them in yourself in a plain diary, they're really useful pros. What have you noticed tonight? About who way?
Sorry. I had a conversation with a guy who was a ex-Premier League player, now turned football manager, coach. And he was saying that he does some journaling. He said that he never shares with anybody. So the night before a training session, because I train every day, most days, he'll write in there how he thinks the session will go, in terms of people, personalities, how it will unfold. And then he'll do his reflections afterwards based upon what he thought would happen previously. So it's not just this went well in the session, I need to change this. It was, I thought this would happen, this is what actually happened. And he does it every single day.
Brilliant.
This, I think that for me is a real example of high performance, but high performing in high performance. This is somebody that is really committed to doing and living a high performance lifestyle every single day. And I think a lot of people don't realize that the gulf between the two things. I'll often say, right, well, I want to commit to this, and I half-arse it. I do that a lot. But so I listened to Phil Neville on a podcast, and he talked about the fact that his whole family have done their exercise before 8 o'clock every single day.
Wow.
That's what they do, and they absolutely live a high performance lifestyle. Every single thing that they do, and I was talking about it with my wife, who knows him quite well, and I said, that must be draining. And she said, no, that's just that is him. That is his life. That's how he operates. He also lives on jelly babies and wine gums and rosé wine, but so he's not entirely vice free, but he absolutely lives a high performance life. And the golf, I think, from us mere normal people, to what goes on at that end is a huge jump.
Yeah.
That we don't understand.
And I think that's the part where we need to bring people's awareness back in, is that like the massive expectations that people have at that level need, maybe not the pre-8, but they need that kind of consistency.
Yeah.
So the performance and the high performance in high performance is that consistency 100%. And that maybe his coping strategy, or the whole family go, listen, this is our family time. It's really good for our mental health. Let's exercise. And that's the time they choose. But around the point you were saying before that, around the pre and post, I think that's absolutely brilliant, because the ripple effect of that is you're not just saying, I think this is how training is going to go. Why do I think that? What are we planning? How's, who else am I speaking to about this particular thought I have? And then when you're reflecting, why didn't it? Whose other opinion am I getting it? From their reflection. And as I said, WhatsApp group earlier, last year with a club, a Gaelic football team, I said to him, listen, create a WhatsApp group with your coaches, and then have some questions and thoughts after the session. So they're all going an hour off on their journey back home, whether it's probing the questions, or they become familiar with the questions. By the time you get home, you've had a thought, you can leave a quick voice note in, or a quick couple of messages, not a big blurb about it. But I love that pre and post idea, that you've had an idea, not just your plan, but you've had an idea about, what you want to see. And then the noticing part in between, somebody might have noticed. So they used to look at who they thought the top performing players in the session were, and the bottom. And listen, they're really vague. Those are broad words, but the lack of consistency in what people saw and heard was great. Such a vehicle for comment. Well, why would you put him? I thought he had an awful session. Oh, well, I was chatting to him down here now, and this is what they're. So it was great, to see as loose as top and bottom would be on it. But, and I speak to Ollie Harder at West Ham, every second day in a text, just to like, how was training, what's going on, and the amount of meticulous planning and detail they do as a group. I mean, I'm only there a session a week, but when I do go, they're getting together in the morning, they're dissecting the session, who's going where, what partnerships, and then always reflecting afterwards, and everybody's getting a feed into that. Doesn't always go smoothly, they're not in a great position in the table, but that consistency in this is what we're going to keep doing. Are we tuned into all the wellness questionnaires that come back from the players? Are we looking at those in the morning, every morning, to see what the players have chosen to share with us, so we can tailor our approach? And then in the evening, align our language. This game is important, but let's focus on ourselves, and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, a lot of really good examples, especially because there's people going back on the ground now, some coaches going back full time in the next couple of weeks, or just have.
I think the interesting point that you picked up on there, that can give coaches some insight. And as we go back into coaching now, and everybody's going to have dealt with this and have found this whole lockdown thing, difficult in different ways, right? I think it's, if you're keeping a record of things that you notice, you might start to put a pattern together of the different triggers that create a different response in somebody. So if you say something to somebody, or you have a particular pair together that ends up in something, just starting to jot this down, and you might start to see a pattern of different triggers happening. So you can then tailor your coaching, because it's very difficult to remember everything like that unless it's it's written down, and there's some kind of way of recording it.
Yeah. And even if you miss some bits near the end, like, 'cause we know there's loads of research around the retention and what the lens that coaches have in a session. But if you are fortunate to have somebody else, or you have these questions on a sheet, I do think it's great to look at that and then review them at the end of the week if you have multiple sessions in a week. So
then that's my weekend, right? So you asked me what I was doing this weekend, and it was a blank page. I had nothing in my nothing. Now I have loads, because I'm now going to be looking at questions as a prompt sheet for coaches to reflect on after the session. I think not just how did the practice go, but some things to prompt discussion and reflection between coaches. That's now my next task that you've added to my list. Thank you.
Tick. Good, cool.
So there we go. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'd say we're about time, are we?
We are indeed. We've totally not done anything on the topic we said we were going to. Standards.
Typical us. Well, listen, thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. The handle is below. It's at Coach Convo. Keep your suggestions coming in, and we love all the feedback, whether it's critical feedback that you've seen something that you want to discuss further, or some positive angles. Definitely share with us. We're always open to that. Coach Conversation, if you want to have a longer email and share some thoughts around future episodes. Have a fantastic week. And if you are back on the ground coaching, best of luck, take care of yourself. And if you're getting back there, get some reflection sheets ready to rock and roll. It's going to be a busy couple of months. Have a great week. Bye.